old Victorian house at the end of Maple Street had stood abandoned for decades, its darkened windows and overgrown garden giving it an ominous presence. The town's children would dare each other to approach the house, but none ever got close enough to touch its crumbling facade. They all knew the story of the haunted doll that resided within. The tale of the haunted doll had been passed down through generations, becoming a staple of local folklore. It was said that the doll belonged to a young girl named Emily, who lived in the house in the late 1800s. Emily had received the doll as a gift from her grandmother, and she cherished it above all else. But when Emily fell ill and passed away at the tender age of 7, the doll was left behind, alone and forgotten. As the years went by, strange occurrences began to happen in the house. Objects would move on their own, eerie whispers echoed through the hallways, and the ghostly figure of a little girl was seen roaming the rooms. The townspeople knew that something was not right, and they believed that Emily's spirit, attached to the doll, was responsible. The house changed owners several times, but none stayed for long. They all left, pale and terrified, speaking of the malevolent spirit that resided within. The doll, with its glassy eyes and porcelain smile, was always found in the center of the chaos, as if it was orchestrating the haunting. Years turned into decades, and the house fell into disrepair, its once grand structure now a decaying shell. The town had grown around it, but the house on Maple Street remained untouched, a dark blight on the landscape. That was until the day the Anderson family moved into town. Unaware of the house's history, they were charmed by its vintage outlook and its surprisingly low price. They saw it as a fixer-upper, a project they could tackle together. As they moved in, they discovered the doll, dusty and forgotten in the attic. Despite its eerie appearance, they decided to keep it, placing it on a shelf in their daughter Lucy's room, unaware of the dark history they were inviting into their home. At first, all was well. The Andersons were happy in their new home, and Lucy was delighted to have a new friend in the doll. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. Lucy began to speak of the doll moving on its own, of whispered conversations in the dead of night. Her once sunny disposition darkened, and she became withdrawn and sullen. Concerned, her parents decided to remove the doll from her room, thinking it was the cause of her distress. But the hauntings only intensified. Objects flew across rooms, shadowy figures were seen in the corners of their eyes, and the sound of a child's laughter echoed through the halls. The Andersons were living in a nightmare, and they realized that they had to leave. In a panic, they packed their belongings, leaving the doll behind as they fled the haunted house. They thought they had escaped the malevolent spirit, but they were wrong. The hauntings followed them to their new home, the unseen presence growing angrier and more violent. Desperate, the Andersons sought the help of a paranormal investigator, hoping to find a way to appease the spirit. The investigator, intrigued by their story, agreed to help. He delved into the history of the house and the tale of the haunted doll, uncovering the tragic story of Emily's untimely death. He believed that her spirit was tethered to the doll, and that she was lashing out in her loneliness and despair. Determined to help, the investigator conducted a séance, attempting to communicate with Emily's spirit. As the ritual began, the air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. The investigator called out to Emily, asking her to reveal herself. And reveal herself she did. The room erupted in chaos, as objects flew through the air, and the sound of a child's cries filled the space. The investigator, his voice steady, implored Emily to find peace, to move on from the world of the living. But Emily, her spirit corrupted by years of loneliness and rage, was not ready to leave. She lashed out, her presence overwhelming the room, and the investigator knew that he was in over his head. In a desperate act, he grabbed the doll, believing it to be the source of Emily's power, and fled the house. He hoped that by removing the doll, he would sever Emily's connection to the Andersons, giving them a chance at a normal life. But as he left, the cries of the little girl followed him, filled with sorrow and fury. The investigator, his heart heavy, realized that he had not saved the Andersons. He had only angered the haunted doll's spirit further. Now, the town of Maple Street lives in fear as the story of the haunted doll's revenge spreads. The old Victorian house stands abandoned once more, its darkened windows hiding the wrath of the unseen spirit within. And the doll, with its glassy eyes and porcelain smile, waits in the attic, its presence a lingering threat, its revenge unfinished, its story a chilling tale of loneliness and rage, with an ending that remains forever open. As the story of the haunted doll's revenge circulated through the town, a shroud of terror descended upon Maple Street. The Andersons, now far away, tried to rebuild their lives, but the haunting memories of their time in the Victorian house lingered. The paranormal investigator, his reputation tarnished and his spirit broken, became obsessed with the case. He dove into ancient texts and dark rituals, seeking a way to appease Emily's vengeful spirit. He knew he had to return to the house to face the haunted doll once and for all. Armed with newfound knowledge and a determination to end the nightmare, the investigator made his way back to the old Victorian house. The air was thick with malice as he entered, the weight of Emily's anger pressing down upon him. He climbed the creaking stairs to the attic, where the doll sat waiting. Its eyes, once glassy and dull, now burned with an otherworldly fire. The investigator could feel Emily's presence, her rage palpable. With a deep breath, he began the ritual, chanting in an ancient tongue as he encircled the doll with salt and herbs. The air crackled with energy, and the sound of a child's cries filled the space, louder and more pained than before. The investigator pushed on, his voice growing louder as he implored Emily to let go of her anger, to move on to the afterlife. But Emily, her spirit twisted by years of solitude and fury, was not so easily swayed. She lashed out, her power breaking through the circle of protection. The doll flew across the room, its porcelain face cracking as it hit the wall. The investigator, thrown back by the force, felt a sharp pain as he hit the ground. And then, silence. The investigator, battered and bruised, looked up to see the doll standing before him, its cracked face now twisted in a sinister smile. He had failed. In a low, chilling whisper, the doll spoke, its voice a mixture of Emily's cries and a darker, more malevolent force. "You cannot save them," it hissed. "You cannot save yourself." With that, the doll moved, quick as a shadow, disappearing into the dark recesses of the attic. The investigator, his strength fading, crawled out of the house, knowing he had unleashed something he could not control. The town of Maple Street lived in fear as strange and violent hauntings plagued the community. The Victorian house, once a symbol of terror, now stood as a monument of their collective nightmare. And the doll, its revenge unsatisfied, continued its reign of terror, its presence a constant threat, its whispers a chilling reminder of the wrath of the haunted doll's revenge. The story of Emily and her haunted doll became a legend, a chilling tale told in hushed whispers and fearful glances. The old Victorian house was left to rot, its dark history a stain on the town's memory. But the hauntings did not cease. They spread, unseen and unstoppable, as the doll claimed its victims, one by one. The town of Maple Street, once vibrant and lively, was now a place of sorrow and fear, its residents haunted by a vengeful spirit they could not see or understand. And as the final chapter of the haunted doll's revenge remains unwritten, the town waits, its future uncertain, its nights filled with terror, and the doll, its smile ever present, bides its time, its revenge eternal, its story a never-ending nightmare.